This here on the left is what we would refer to as a miniature electrolyte capacitor. It's about 7 millimeters length by 7 millimeters width. The one next to it, or the two next to it, are what we would call ultra miniature electrolyte capacitors. And these are about 5 millimeters long and about 4 millimeters wide. Now, I recently had a job where I had to replace a whole bunch of these. It was a refurbishment job for a micro cassette player. And although I was able to get hold of this size, trying to get hold of this size was a nightmare. The usual places where I get my components from, they did not have these in stock. And the one or two places that I was able to locate, they either wanted you to buy in a large amount, like 100 pieces, or they wanted a ridiculous amount of money for these tiny capacitors. Now, these capacitors the ones of this size now, these were used in the 80s and 90s a lot in these micro cassette players, and they're not very common, and that's why they're difficult to get hold of. So, I was in a bit of a situation. I had to replace these capacitors, and I couldn't get the sizes that I wanted. Now, there's a little tip that I want to share with you in this video, how I overcame this issue. And it's a very simple thing, but if you didn't know, you'd probably overlook it. The tip that I want to share with you today is that these, as I say, they're not very common, and they're very hard to get hold of. But aluminium electrolyte capacitors are very common, and you can still get hold of them quite easily. Okay, so let me show you some aluminium electrolyte capacitors. Let's move these out the way. Right, so as you can see here, we have two aluminium electrolyte capacitors, and if we turn them on their side here, okay, you can get some idea of how small these are. But even these were not small enough, so I could not locate anything smaller than this. But there's a little trick that I want to share with you. If you take the smallest size that you can find, okay, and if you turn them over, and if you take the legs, and if you flick them up, like so, and the other side as well, right, then what will happen is this plastic piece will come right off, just like so, right? And that, just that little bit makes all the difference, because that makes the capacitor a lot smaller, okay? And in my case, it was perfect. Once I'd removed those plastic pieces, I was able to use these in place of the electrolyte capacitors, and it worked out perfectly. So as I say, it's just a little trick or a little tip, and it could save you a lot of head scratching and a lot of headache trying to figure out how you're going to manage to get the size that you want to get. So I've fitted some of them to the board, and I've got a few left to do, which I'm going to do now. But before we do that, I just want to get back to the demonstration table, and I want to speak to you a little bit more about this refurbishment job that came in. So let me give you a little bit of the backstory to this project that I've been working on. This here is a micro cassette player that belonged to a friend of mine, and he sent it in to have it refurbished, basically. And what he mentioned was that he said he purchased this in 1988, at the time he was about 8 years old. He's in his 40s now, and bless his father. His father's no longer alive, but he and his father went out and they purchased this together from a video and TV repair store. And in those days, obviously the internet wasn't around, but you used to have these TV and video cassette player repair stores on most high streets. So when you went inside, you would see like TVs and stuff that they've repaired secondhand, which they would have for sale. They would have new units as well. And then under the counter, and they usually have like a glass counter, and under the counter, you'd find all these little gadgets and gadgets that they would be selling. So he said he purchased this with his father, and he's got many fun memories that he had with this recorder. One of the funny stories that he told me was he said he would secretly record his brothers and sisters, and what he would do is he would then blackmail them for sweets and chocolates, and he would basically say, look, if you don't give me access to your stash, then mum and dad are going to find out what you've been saying. And he said he did that for a while and he got away with it. And one day his brother beat the crap out of him. And he said he never did it again after that. So that was quite a funny story. He said he's got a lot of old tapes with some recordings of his father. And he would like to play them and listen to them. But obviously, being over 34 years old now, this is it just doesn't work anymore. So he sent it in and he said, please, if you could, get it up and running, and whatever the cost is, no expense spared. You just do whatever you need to do, and if you could get it running for me again. So anyway, when I got this in for repair, I had a couple of challenges which I want to talk to you about. It was in a really bad state. I've cleaned it up a little bit now, but it was quite a bad state. There were some old batteries in here, and they had leaked out and completely corroded the contacts where the AA batteries would fit. So what I was able to do is we've got a tool like this, which has got like a rough bit on the end, and it's like a drill, okay? And we use it to etch out parts of PCBs when we're making new lines or repairing old lines and stuff. So I was able to use this to get in here and to really shine out and polish out all of that rust off the contacts. So that was one of the first issues that I had to deal with. The second issue that I had to deal with on this was, if I can take it apart and show you, right. If you have a look here, the belt, there's one main belt inside here, which goes around the motor here and the driven wheel down here. That belt had completely corroded away. So I had to manually figure out how to measure for a replacement belt and source and replace it, which I've made a video about that. So if you want to learn about that, do look in our video section on our YouTube page, and you will find that video. So that was the second challenge that I had. And the third challenge was the main PCB, which is, let me just get the hold of that. So this here is the main PCB, and it's a lot different than the PCBs that you'll see today. A lot of these components look like they were hand soldered on. Can't say for sure. There are some SMDs on here as well, but if you go on the back side, there's quite a few electrolyte capacitors, and when I tested them with the multimeter, almost every single one of them were out of spec, and they did not match the specifications that were written on the side for the capacitance. So as you can see, I've replaced a couple of them here, right? These tiny ones here. You can see how small they are, right? If you compare that to that there is a 16 volt 10 UF capacitor. Now, if you have a look here, this here is a normal 16 volt 10 UF capacitor, normal size, and you know, a small one, and you can see how much. How can I show you that? You can see how much. And you can see how much bigger they are compared to those ultra miniatures, right? So, right, another 2 tips that I want to share with you if you're ever going to do one of these repairs is basically what you want to do is, before you start removing those old capacitors. I've got quite a few which I need to put back onto the board. There was some here and here. There's another one here, and there's a few more which I need to put on. These three, this one, 2, 3, these three were in spec and they were fine. But the rest of them, every single one of them needed to be replaced. So the tip that I want to share with you is that before you start taking these capacitors off, because you probably won't have a service manual for one of these, and the board does not tell you which way the capacitors go around, which way, what hole the plus goes into and what hole the minus of the capacitor goes into. So what I would say is take a picture from 4 angles, one picture from this angle, one picture from this angle, one picture from this angle, and one picture from this angle. That way, when you come back to fit your replacement capacitors, you'll know exactly which way the capacitors go back into the board, where the minus sits and where the plus sits, right? And another thing that you might want to do also, because a lot of these capacitors, the smaller ones, they're different ratings, but they're similar size. So unless you make a little map, like I've done here, and you write down which ones go where, then you, as I say, if you haven't, most likely you probably won't have a service manual, then you're going to get confused when you put them back. So take some pictures and write down on a piece of paper where you took each one off from. So when you come back to fit it, you can put it all back in the right place. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go back under the microscope and I'm going to install these capacitors back onto the board and see if we can get this tape player running again. Okay, so before you put these capacitors back onto this board, these new ones that you've got, we don't know how long these have been sitting at the place that we got them from. So just quickly run a test to make sure that your new capacitors are within spec before you fit them back onto the board. So sometimes what I do is when I'm working with the really small components like this, just to help me get it soldered on a bit more, I'll use some glue tack just to kind of hold it in place. If I can glue tack it against a component on the side, it just makes it a bit easier to sort out. So I'm going to do that. Right, you want to have a look at that. So all I did was I just pressed it in with a bit of glue tack, and that'll hold it in the bottom without moving about, and I can now easily solder that into place. And as you can see from the top, that's soldered in quite nicely. Okay, so we've just got 2 more to install and we're done. One here and one here. So if I go by these pictures, the minus on this one is on the top. Okay, and my same principle again, I'm going to use the glue tack. And now we've just got one more left to install. And according to the picture, the minus on that one goes into this hole here. Okay, quite happy with that. And as you can see, those 3 capacitors have gone on back onto the board quite nicely. I'll just clean it up with a bit of isopropyl alcohol and we'll proceed to putting the board back together. Okay, so we've got our replacement rubber drive belt, and this is what it looks like, and here's the measurement. So we're just going to fit that back onto the cassette player and then we'll assemble it back together. Okay, so that's been installed back as it should. And we've just got 4 more wires to connect, the 2 power wires and the 2 wires for the head, and we should be good to go. Okay, so these are the 2 wires coming off the head, the white and the the unsheathed one. So the white is the plus, so we'll just put that in now. That's fine. And then we've got the ground here, which is fine. And we just got two more to connect. And that should be fine. Now all we have to do is clean up the board, assemble it all back together into the case, and we should be good to go. Let's just give this a little clean up. Just going to get this back inside here. Five screws left to go, and we should be done. Right, it looks like we're almost done. Let's put in a fresh set of batteries. Okay, so we've put it all back together, and I've got a new cassette here, which I'm going to test it with. But before we do that, let's just quickly have a look if it's functioning correctly. So play, it's fine. Play is spinning. You can hear the speaker. Right, rewind is working, and forward is working as well. So let's put a cassette in and let's do a little test. Initially it looks okay. So here goes. Just rewind that. Right. Let's try this thing out. Okay, so the microphone on this thing is located here at the top, as you can see. So I'm going to kind of hold it up here this way, and I'm going to try and speak into it as best as I can. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Test check, test check. Test check 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. Test check 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so I think that's sufficient for a test. Let's rewind that back and let's see if it worked. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Test check, test check. Test check 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. Test check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so I think that's sufficient for a test. Let's rewind that back and let's see if it worked. Well, I'm quite happy with the way that worked out, and I think my friends are going to be quite chuffed with that as well. Remember, if you've got anything that you want us to repair, we repair just about anything that runs off electric. You can contact us through the website. The links will be in the description, and if you do contact us, we will get back to you shortly to assist you further and to help you repair your electronic devices. Well, I hope we all learnt something today, something that we can take away and use in our own repairs. If you do find anything in these videos helpful, then do subscribe and like and share the videos with others, as that helps us grow as well. And with that, we're going to wrap it up for today. I think it was a longer video than I would have probably liked it to have been, but sometimes to explain things in detail, they do go on for a bit longer. So, as I always say, Bye for now and have a nice day.